me, or 2 days in a row it's Trump, then it's my fault. I mean, he blamed me on Tuesday for not promoting masks. That is not my job to promote people to wear masks. My job is to govern my children and govern myself. So we'll get into that later too, because I'm going to keep going forever. But I know why you're here too, because our next speaker is the one and only Charlie Kirk. He's the founder of Turning Point USA, a grassroots organization that advocates conservative principles at high schools, college, and university campuses. Nationally syndicated radio talk show host, which you can hear here on AM 560 from 1 to 2 p.m. How many of you started listening? Good job. He's the author of the best-selling book, The MAGA Doctrine, which is on sale across the hall, which he'll be signing copies of later this
I can see
afternoon.
fine, it's just far away, but
you can get in line and meet Charlie. He's a native of Prospect Heights. And as a woman from Mount Prospect, we call that a suburb of Mount Prospect Heights. A graduate of, it's worse, Wheeling High School. How many Wheeling grads are here? You're never shy, so let's know. Wheeling grads are here. And I say that jokingly because I went to Hersey High School, both District 214. So please welcome to the stage the one and only Charlie Kirk.
Thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. I guess we're not in Illinois, we're in Wisconsin, and so it's great to be here. We're crisscrossing the country. We've given over 120 speeches in the last 90 days in about 20 states. We have never worked as hard as we have towards one unified objective, which is to get the President of the United States 4 more years from Florida, Arizona, Tennessee, Texas, Maine, Minnesota, you name it, we've been there. Through Turning Point Action, our political vehicle, we've knocked on over 250,000 doors. We have reached hundreds of millions of people on digital social media, speaking on college campuses, speaking in churches, you name it. And so when we got invited here to Wisconsin, I said, of course, we want to come to Battleground Territory America. We'll be in North Carolina tomorrow, giving 4 speeches in churches across North Carolina. And on Monday, I think we're going to be finishing strong in Arizona. And so look, we all know that this election is the most important election since 1860. We feel it. I think we need to kind of explain even further why and what the stakes are if we don't win on Tuesday. So first, let's just take a diagnostic of how we're doing. There's some very positive signs of President Trump. Early voting in Florida is going unbelievably well. Florida is now kind of being filled with people like myself who grew up in Illinois and left Illinois, and now I'm a Florida resident and proud to be a Florida resident. And it's because Illinois betrayed all of us, and we know that. I always say that Illinois has the best people, the hardest working people, incredible businesses, and the worst politics in the country. And the political class in Illinois, and both parties, by the way, both parties betrayed us. We had Republican governors. We won't say any names, but we all know who I'm talking about. Recently, that very well could have fixed a lot of this stuff, and they acted no differently than Democrats. And now that's when you get someone like J.B. Pritzker, who, again, J.B. Pritzker was born on third, who thought he had a triple. He is one of the most cowardly, self-righteous, immoral, unqualified people ever to be in politics in the history of our country.
yes.
Unfortunately, has an incredible amount of power. And so there's some positive things happening for the president. There's also some things that should be worry for concern. There's incredible, kind of unprecedented amounts of voter turnout, which traditionally will help Democrats. The big tech companies and the media have decided to become a communication arm of the Democrat Party. We are being outspent 5-1 in most states across the country. They are outraising us. They are, unfortunately, many of the key battleground states, people are still blaming the president for a lot of the virus and a lot of the things surrounding him. So we don't know what's going to happen Tuesday. I think that the president will, though, win the state of Florida, will win North Carolina, will win Iowa, will win Ohio, and we'll see if he's able to pick up one more upper Midwest state, like Michigan, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania. And that's kind of to be determined. So what happens if Biden wins? Let's talk about it specifically. First of all, if Biden wins, it's on us. If Biden wins, it's because we didn't do enough. It's that simple. We've been outspent, we've been outworked, we kind of allowed the media to set the narrative on a lot of this stuff. And quite honestly, if we lose, it'll be because we let them have it. And that's just the honest truth. So if they win, immediately they're going to try to make DC and Puerto Rico a state. We know that. They're going to try to abolish the Electoral College. They will move very quickly to pack the U.S. Supreme Court. But even beyond that, people say we're going to become a socialist country. I don't know if that's going to happen immediately. I think that we're not analyzing this the way that they actually have it planned. You're going to see something much more dangerous than socialism set in. You're going to see the blend and the fusion of the trillion-dollar companies merge with the trillion-dollar government. So we have two governments in our country. Can we turn on those lights just a little bit, just so I can see the audience? Thank you. It's so bright. We have two governments in our country. We have a Silicon Valley government and a Washington, D.C. government. And we as conservatives only focus on the Washington, D.C. government, the civil service, the FBI, the IRS, the DOJ. But what if I told you that the Silicon Valley government is more powerful than our Washington, D.C. government? Google knows that every single one of you are here. They're incredibly intelligent. They are ahead of the curve on computer processing. They can spy on you, take your data, and if they kick you off their platform, you have no rights to sue them. You have no rights to hold them accountable. For example, if the FBI came through here right now and shut down this gathering because they didn't like what you were saying, we would sue and we would win in federal court. If YouTube shuts down our live stream right now, we have no capacity to sue them. Look at the New York Post article. The New York Post article comes out and shows that Hunter Biden and his father was selling our country out to foreign adversaries. China, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, making millions of dollars. Hunter Biden's escapades that we don't even get into, but let's just say it's so disgusting and so gross, it's hard to even say. No one covers it at all whatsoever. The media, not just that they won't touch it, now we know a couple days ago, the FBI has confirmed that Hunter Biden is under active federal investigation for money laundering, and his father might also be under active federal investigation for money laundering. Zero coverage from the New York Times, from Huffington Post, from BuzzFeed, from the Chicago Tribune, nothing. It's as if, what are you talking about? This doesn't even exist. But who's the one that's been producing cover fire for them? It's the tech companies. If you shared that article on Twitter, you would lose your Twitter account. Just last night, the New York Post just regained entry back in their Twitter account. Facebook was deactivating any pages or profiles that were sharing the Hunter Biden story. So if Joe Biden wins, you're going to have the multi-trillion-dollar companies merge with our government. And that's not socialism. That's much closer to fascism. See, the one thing that we have gotten wrong in the last 6 months with how we've communicated these lockdowns is that we need to talk about who's actually benefited from the lockdowns. Yeah. The richest people in this country are wealthier today than they were before the lockdowns. All the people that live in Winnetka that are in the Zoom and Skype class, they have the luxury to be able to survive lockdowns in our country. The muscular class in our country, the people that have to drive trucks, wait tables, move boxes, be able to actually work with their hands, be carpenters, HVAC, or plumbers, they can't survive another lockdown in this country. The only way they'd be able to survive is if J.B. Pritzker gets his vision, which is they all get addicted endlessly to government. It's a transitionary phase, everybody. These lockdowns are not about health or any of that nonsense. Lockdowns have no bearing whatsoever in doing, they only do one thing, they delay the inevitable. I'll prove it to you. Florida has more elderly people per capita than any other state in the country. I was just in Florida. Restaurants are fully open, churches are open, businesses are open, their hospitalizations are down, their death rates are down. Is it a different virus in Florida than Illinois? No. They have a leader in Florida and you have a coward in Illinois. That's the difference.
That's right.
But you look at Jeff Bezos, you look at the ruling class in our country, they want another series of lockdowns for a very specific reason. They want the lockdowns because not only will their wealth increase, but the power they have always fantasized about will be given to them because normal people and regular people will not be able to survive another government intervention through this. So Joe Biden represents not just all the incredibly radical, malevolent ideas that we've all talked about, but he also, in my opinion, will be the last phase in the fusion between big business and big government. And so we as conservatives, we only criticize big government. Huge mistake. Here's a wake-up call for all of us conservatives. Corporations are not on our side, everybody. They're against us. Bank of America, $1 billion to BLM Incorporated. PepsiCo, $400 million. YouTube, $100 million. All these free enterprise companies that are supposed to be on our side, they're not. They're funding the opposition. Why? It's because these companies don't want a free market. They know as soon as a free market gets destroyed, their incumbency gets protected. What does a free market mean? It means competition. Google doesn't want to have to compete. Google looks at themselves as a government. How dare you question our monopoly when it comes to 92% of all search results go through Google? Why? How dare you question the fact that we're laying fiber optic cables across the country? Google would love nothing more than the next 1,000 Google competitors to not have the wealth, the capital, the aspiration, or the capacity to compete against them. So it's much less like socialism and much more like some sort of corporate cronyist fascism that we're heading. We're heading there at a disturbingly quick pace. So we have a chance to fix that though. And here's the irony is that I go to college campuses, so you guys don't have to. I've spoken at over 150 college campuses in the last year and a half. And thank you. And when I go to college campuses, one of the biggest criticisms I'm told, Republicans are the party of the wealthy, rich, and the few. The billionaires in this country are financing Joe Biden's campaign. In the last 30 days, Wall Street has contributed $100 million to the Biden for President campaign. Donald Trump, a couple $100,000 that we can even trace. Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, the biggest banks on the planet are all behind Joe Biden. Why? Because he'll protect them. Joe Biden is the candidate of the very same people that Bernie Sanders says he wants to challenge. Joe Biden represents the Hollywood elite, he represents the big tech elite, he represents the transnational elite, and the scary thing is even more so than Obama, is that they will then embark on a mission unlike anything we've ever seen to crush all of you. They are going to make you believe what they believe, and that's the second part of it, which is even more creepy.
Yes.
Which is that this is the first time in our nation's history that they are going to force you to believe something. And I deal with this all the time with students across the country. It's not enough that you're like indifferent. It's not enough that you just say, I disagree with what you have to say. It's like, no. If you don't post the black square on Instagram, you're a bad person and we're going to find you. If you don't have the BLM sign outside of your home, you're a bad person. And even worse, if you wear that Trump MAGA hat, we're going to find you, we're going to dox you, we're going to publicize your family's information. And now you have an entire movement that is almost theological in nature, where they're saying, if you disagree with us, we're not just going to call you bad names, we're going to punish you. And we're about to platform that on the other side. So the question is, will the people in this state, by the way, Wisconsin, and will the people in Michigan and Pennsylvania, that's the whole election it comes down to. There is no path for the president without Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania. One of those four. I actually think we're at this moment, based on everything I've seen, we're one state away. We are one state away. So the question is, will a state like Michigan, who voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary in 2016, then turn around and go become the corporate billionaire elite candidate? That's who Joe Biden is, because Joe Biden has no agenda. He's not going to be president. It'll be a Harris administration. And the thing that's different than a Harris administration than a Bernie Sanders administration, they're both very dangerous, is that Harris will not go on corporate crusades. It's more of a threat to normal people, because then she'll pick up the phone to Facebook, she'll pick up the phone to Google, and she'll say, hey, can you make sure you shut off Larry Elder, Charlie Kirk, and Candace Owens' Facebook page? They're bothering me. And guess what? There's nothing we can do about that. They'll control our government and they'll do it. Or they'll say, hey, why don't we go enforce a new version of the fairness doctrine and shut off talk radio? Because that's who they are. And you've seen that through every single variation. So we're like 72 hours out from polls being closed in a lot of these states across the country. The president is doing 16 events in the next 3 days. No one has ever campaigned as hard as this president for the presidency. Joe Biden is doing that. Joe Biden is doing, I don't know what he's doing. But I'll tell you this. You want to know the good news, and then I'll tell you the troubling news. The good news is Biden sees what we see. Biden is not going to Arizona. Biden is not going to Florida. Biden is focusing on 3 states. He's not doing the Hillary Clinton thing. He is in Michigan today with Barack Obama. He's in Pennsylvania on Monday doing 4 stops. he knows that this is now, the map has now shrunk. And it comes down to the industrial Midwest, which is values that all of us grew up with, right? Values where you work hard, you love your country, you build a family, you're able to go to church. And so, and if Donald Trump does not win with what the left has represented itself as, it will be, no, you're right. And I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm not trying to say all those, that it's going to be the end of America or anything. I don't necessarily believe that. But it will be so incredibly disappointing that normal people would not see exactly what the American left has become.
Yes.
And the Democrat Party has become. I really believe that. And so there's still time left on the clock. So here's one of the things I wish we would have done better a couple weeks ago, is that President Trump should have said very clearly, we are for opening the country, Joe Biden is for closing the country. Right now, Boris Johnson, Angela Merkel, and Emmanuel Macron are completely shutting down their countries again in Europe. Let me say this again. There is zero scientific evidence for shutting down your country. None. There is no evidence to show that shutdowns and lockdowns have done anything to help hospitalizations or help death rates. Nothing whatsoever. All it does is help calm down the media chattering class that is trying to overemphasize certain parts of this. If you're at risk, you should absolutely take the right precautions. However, don't shut down the rest of the country because you're also at risk. Open up the schools. And I went to District 214, Wheeling High School. They still have no football. They still have no spring sports. J.B. Pritzker should have to answer for every single student that has committed suicide in the Chicagoland area.
Yes.
Like the young girl that threw herself in front of a train in Glen Ellen. J.B. Pritzker, what do you have to say about that? Or that awful Zoom incident that happened in Chicago. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. I won't have to say it. What about the sexual abuse, alcoholism, depression, social isolation? The CDC has said 1 out of 4 young people have contemplated suicide in the last 90 days. You take away their sports, their social gatherings, their prom, their commencement, any sort of physical human-to-human contact. You just have them behind their smartphone and their screen all day long. You act like everything's going to be okay, despite the fact that young people ages 14 to 30 have a higher chance, just that group, not every group, just that group has a higher chance of dying from the seasonal flu with this virus. Not every group, but that group, it's absolutely completely true. It's probably even lower than that because a lot of them have the virus without us even knowing it. So what's really going on here? What's going on here is that long desired power grabbers have finally seen their opportunity. They could not have wished, they could not have designed, let me put it that way, an opening quite like this to seize control over our country. And so we know what we need to do, and I encourage everyone here to do one thing. I encourage all of you to go through your entire phone and peer-to-peer text message every single person on your phone why you're voting for President Trump and why you're voting Republican. Imagine this. We have probably, 350, 400 people here, more or less, 500 people. If every single person texted 1,000 people in your phone, that'd be the same as 500,000 person-to-person contacts. That's the new equivalent of knocking on doors. And by the way, how many of you have gotten those annoying text messages from the Democrats recently? Are you voting for this? We're not doing that as much. That's part of my point. So we got to empty our phone and go peer-to-peer text message, point by point by point by point. But let's talk about after the election. No matter what happens, we still got a lot of problems in this country. And I think that, especially with students and young people, there's something that I think a lot of people are missing, which is that if you look at the crisis with students, the lockdowns will go down as the dumbest decision ever done in a decent, wealthy country. There is no data whatsoever to support it, and I think it will go down as the worst mistake in American history, no doubt, especially when it comes to young people and it comes to students. But there's a crisis with the next generation. It's a revolution brewing, and it's different than you might think. So conservatives only focus on the ideological. Liberals only focus on the material. I actually think it's a mixture of both. So for example, conservatives say, well, all the kids are liberal because we're sending them to these universities and they're getting filled with bad ideas. It's exactly right. For the life of me, I don't understand why the college population attendance has not gone down. Only 59% of kids that go to college graduate. Out of those that graduate, 44% of them are still working in minimum wage jobs. Of those people that have graduated, and 54% of young people are living at home with their parents. I don't understand what the benefit was to borrow money you don't have, to study things that don't matter, to find jobs that don't exist. It's a perplexing economic model. It really is. And so, but beyond that, they absolutely have been filled with very, very dangerous ideas. That's exactly right. The other side is this, though, and this is where we conservatives get this completely and totally wrong, is that there's a material side to this. I want anyone over the age of 40 here to think back to your life in the 20s, when you were 25 to 30. Think about, you were probably working hard and you saw your life get materially better year after year. You were building equity, you were building a bigger, hopefully a nicer, bank account, you were able to spend money a little bit. You were believing in the American way of life, right? The more you worked, the more rewards you got. 5 to 7 years ago, we should have raised the fire alarm because 20-somethings are not experiencing that. They're not. And I see some people like, what are you talking about? Well, first of all, you just shut down their country for 9 months. So what jobs are they supposed to get exactly? We as conservatives say to young people, well, go get a job. What exact job do you want me to get in Illinois right now? The only thing they could do is go apply for government assistance. Perfect plan for that. Number 2, what skills do they have? I mean, you go to university, like, what's the skill? Like, I got that you have the piece of paper. But what's the skill? We interview over 3,000 young people that we hire at Turning Point USA every year. One of my favorite things I ask out of recent college graduates is, what's your skill? And they say, well, I went to Northwestern and I studied political science. I said, no. What's your skill? And they said, well, I took all these classes. I said, I got that. What can you do that a high schooler can't do? The answer is nothing, right? I mean, there is no skill there. I mean, they got a lot of debt. They graduated with a piece of paper. But now, if they studied plumbing or they were an HVAC or they were a carpenter, they absolutely have a skill. They could do something that somebody else can't do. They gain a competitive and comparative advantage. So they're saddled with debt. The average young person has $45,000 in debt, student debt, medical debt, credit card debt, personal debt, and not even home mortgage debt. We stuff them into incredibly expensive urban centers and cities, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Chicago, Milwaukee, where they're renting, not owning, right? So they're not building equity. They're not getting married. There's more single 30-year-olds than married 30-year-olds for the first time in the history of Western civilization. We're on pace to have 500,000 less children next year than this year. A lot of you probably thought, oh, wow, shutdown, lockdown, everyone at home, birth rates are going to go up. Wrong. Birth rates are plummeting. We're on the verge of a civilizational collapse. Why? Because it's too expensive to have kids. That's why. It's the number one reason why people get it. It's too expensive to have children in our country. Okay. So then, they're not owning anything. They're not taking out mortgages. They're not building wealth. They're not having kids. They have very little to any skills. They live in urban areas. Don't be surprised when those young people, when they're 30, and they're 32, and their net worth is unchanged, all of a sudden they want to burn down the country around them. Because they're filled with all these ideas, and they're going to start to believe the nihilism that we filled them with. And that's the thing that conservatives have missed terribly the last couple of years. Is we're like, it's all ideological, the left says it's all material. I think it's a mixture of both. I think that when you have a generation that is not able to have any sort of measuring stick of themselves moving up in life, and they say, I did everything I was supposed to do. I went to college, I got the degree, I took out debt, I took all the classes, I have $40,000 in debt, and I'm miserable. And by the way, no wonder why J.B. Pritzker wanted to legalize marijuana. Like, you have a revolution brewing on your hands, right? Of course you will. The more young people that you could do weed, the better, or else they're going to burn everything down. Of course you do. And for upper middle class families, this is a very difficult thing because a lot of upper middle class families say, well, college is the ticket to the American dream. No, it's not. There is zero data to support that. 41% of kids that go to college drop out with debt and without any sort of anything to show with it. They drop out. They don't even graduate. So what do we do about it? We have to restore very quickly, in 18 months or less, young people's confidence in the American way of life, or else you're going to have a charismatic Bernie Sanders on a national platform in 18 to 20 months that'll make Elizabeth Warren look like a model. Oof. And for a lot of people that I speak to, it's hard to build this out. People say, well, why is Bernie Sanders so popular? They say it's because they're stuffed with all these bad ideas. You're exactly right. But when you're 30 years old and you're $75,000 in debt and you're still working at the local Starbucks because you got your North African lesbian poetry degree from the University of Chicago, and you got a guy that's come on the scene that is promising financial, not just free. This is a very important point, though. It's not just free. They look at Bernie Sanders to give them freedom. Think about it. This is something that we all miss. Someone comes along and says, I'm going to get rid of your shackles, your debt. They look at that as a freedom candidate. We miss this. Now, we know that's not real freedom. We know it's not. But then they say, my parents told me to go get that degree. All my friends told me to go get that incredibly inflated. So they look at Bernie Sanders and they say, he's going to liberate me. Of course, it's nonsense. And people say, well, they just have to learn the stories of Cuba, Venezuela, Argentina. They don't believe it. They don't. That is the worst way you can communicate to it. This is, they think it's all, young people, some young people resonate with it as family members, but I go down to Miami 2 days ago. 700 Hispanics on fire for Trump. It's awesome. I talked to some of these Hispanics, Cuban Americans that lived under Castro, and they pulled me aside, tears in their eyes. They say, Charlie, why is it that I had to flee political prison from Fidel Castro, get on a raft to come to Miami, and now I'm seeing my grandkids say that I don't know what real communism is. It's because your narrative is not connecting with them. That's why. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I say they've been told and programmed that you have a mythologized view of socialism. That it's no different than like Homer's Odyssey or something that is so distant. And that's one of the things I think that if we're serious about not just winning this election, but winning the future, what are we doing to reinforce, not just reinforce, but reinvigorate students' belief in this experiment, the American way of life? And it's even worse than everything I've articulated, because now they're taking 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, and they're telling them that you have white privilege, that there's something wrong with the color of your skin. They're teaching 1619 Project. They're infiltrating all the textbooks in all the schools. And so they're hyper-feminizing the American education system. And there's a war on men, the likes of which is very, very hard to even articulate. And so then don't be surprised when all of a sudden somebody tries to come along and put all that together. We are lucky, though, everybody. You know why we're lucky? We're lucky we're running up against Joe Biden. Seriously. Yeah. If we are running up against a smoother, anyone, like a Bill Clinton socialist right now, we would lose in a landslide. We would lose Montana. I'm not kidding. No, seriously. I see the data. I talk to these people. The socialists have made a huge mistake. They've given us a couple gifts. First of all, they've way overplayed their hands. Number 2, they're completely undisciplined. Number 3, they're the first socialist movement in world history to say they hate the country they're trying to take over. Think about it. The Cubans, when Fidel took power, he was like, we're the true Cubans. When Vladimir Lenin took power, he's like, we're the real Russians. When Mao Zedong took power, he's like, we're the real Chinese. Pol Pot, Mussolini. This is the first movement ever where they're like, give us power because we hate this place. Like, it's bizarre. And in fact, in some ways, they think it's going to work because things are so good and we have things so amazing in Western society. It's the only way that the socialists and the Marxists could actually attain any form of power. And so we're lucky because we're running up against a corporate Democrat, not a movement Democrat. But I'm telling you what's coming next. Because what happens on college campuses does not stay on college campuses. What happens on college campuses will soon be in corporate boardrooms. It will be in the halls of Congress. And I'm telling you what's coming next. There will be a movement of 80 million people that will agree in the framework that I'm working in of debt forgiveness. We were lied to, corporate raiders, give us representation, free us from our bondage. And if we are not serious about improving the American way of life for normal people and for young people, we're going to be a 20% party like that. Because here's the problem, is that President Donald Trump, in a lot of different ways, is much more of a pragmatist than a movement conservative. He is. And if the Democrats just got moderate on certain social issues, if they decided not to have a complete and total war on religion, they would win a lot of these communities that have been devastated by the pain of a lot of these lockdowns. Again, we're lucky because the Democrats have no discipline at all whatsoever. So the question is then, what are we trying to articulate in not just this election, but in the future for our movement and for the party. Like, how do we sell this? Well, it's very simple. I don't think it's that complicated. As I said, we want to reinforce, build, and strengthen the American way of life. The American way of life is completely exceptional, and it's in like one or two things, which is you work hard and you do the right thing, you should be rewarded for that. That's not that hard of a principle, right? The second thing is this: is you don't blame other people for your problems. You look inwardly, not externally. You become a victor, not a victim. And you're able to see yourself with a measuring stick, improve your quality of life. And the third thing is this: we should want young people to have lots of children. The birth rate in this country is a fire alarm, everyone. 500,000 less children next year than this year. You know what they're going to try to do? They're like, well, let's just bring in another 1.5 million people from across the world. And then you wonder why Minnesota's all of a sudden turned blue. You wonder why Virginia's a blue state. And so when the natural-born population is not having children, then they're going to try to have to replace that in some way or some fashion. I'm actually really optimistic, though, despite all of that. I'm sorry, I can't see you guys. I feel like I'm in an operating room. So, despite all of that, here's some positive trends, whether we win or lose on Tuesday. There is a real defection in the Black community from the Democrat Party. I don't know how big it's happening. Hispanics will have record support of President Trump this Tuesday. And the Republican Party has rightfully regained its place as the workers' party in this country. It has. The people that shower before work and shower after work. The muscular class. The people that say, I didn't go to college and we're okay, we say, welcome into our party. The Democrats have now created themselves as a party of the 0.1% and the permanent government addicted class. That's who the Democrats are. You get government benefits endlessly, we're going to represent you, and you're in the wealthiest top of 1%, and you want government deals, government stimulus, government carve-outs, we represent you. There's actually much more of where the Republican Party is heading than where the Democrat Party is heading. And I also think, I'm optimistic also in the sense that the Republican Party, thanks to President Trump, is actually a party now that is unafraid to fight for the first time. And I saw this accomplishment from President Trump is extraordinary. And we know this, I'm sure other speakers have talked about this, but 300 federal judges, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Between Israel and the Arab Emirates.
Yes.
The Iran deal completely canceled. I can use the podium mic too. Southern border wall finally being built. Largest middle class tax cut in American history. Finally getting serious about child sex trafficking in our country, which has been going on for far too long. Opportunity zones, record HBCU funding, First Step Back, VA Accountability Act, Right to Try Act, finally rebuilding our military, and as I mentioned, the peace deals between Israel, UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, completely and totally ignored by the activist media. All of these things are incredibly positive. Just on judges alone, it's a reason to vote for President Trump. So we know all of that, but unfortunately, the record is not being covered by the activist media. The record is not being represented at all. And so this has now become kind of a referendum on President Trump in a lot of these states, and especially in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. We should win that referendum, by the way. Referendums are really, really hard to win when you're the challenger. Just remember the recall effort here in Wisconsin with Governor Scott Walker. They got the signatures, they spent a bunch of money, and Walker won with more votes in Wisconsin when he ran for the recall on June 5th of 2012 than when he ran originally when he ran for governor. And so President Donald Trump, people hyperfixate on the flaws and all that. I'm not going to get into that. It's just kind of a distraction. We may never get this chance again. We may never. So if he loses, we might go back to the corporate Republican types that don't care about trade, they don't care about immigration, they don't care about judges. All they care about is corporate tax cuts and foreign wars. By the way, my generation knows nothing except endless and continual, reckless and dumb foreign wars. That's the only thing that our generation knows. One of my earliest childhood memories is 9/11. Since then, We've invaded Afghanistan and perpetually occupied it, and recklessly invaded Iraq. What do we have to show for it? Not a lot, except dead Americans and 3 veterans committing suicide every single hour in our country. We have it might not be every hour, but it might be every couple hours. It's a lot. It's thousands every month, and tens of thousands every single year. It's a massive epidemic. We have the middle class that sent their loved ones overseas, and we are still in Afghanistan. And President Donald Trump is the only president in my lifetime since Ronald Reagan to not start a new reckless, endless war overseas. I remember a Democrat Party that used to want wars to be over. I remember a Democrat Party that used to say, we don't want to be represented by Wall Street bankers. I remember a Democrat Party that said, we don't want to be represented by the billionaire class. The wealthiest counties in America, I guarantee you right now, I'll make a prediction, 8 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, will all vote for Joe Biden. You heard it here first. All the wealthiest counties in America, the wealthiest people in America, all supporting Joe Biden. I remember a Democrat Party that used to want to support the plumber, the carpenter, the welder, and the middle income worker. We may never have a chance again for what President Trump actually represents, though, because only President Trump could have actually gotten all this done despite what they threw at him. The impeachment, the spying, the lying, the threats against his family, Southern District of New York. Meanwhile, Joe Biden and Hunter Biden are doing everything that they accused President Trump of, and then some. The only difference between the Biden
Eventually,
and the
I'll finish
Hunter
that.
Biden did
But,
not
ooh,
take
I'm at
the
10%.
course on how to destroy laptops and emails. The only difference. But what President Trump really represents is this: is can normal people actually have a voice in their government? That's what President Trump represents. Because for 30 years, post-Reagan, the answer was no. Ross Perot ran because H.W. Bush betrayed the Ronald Reagan movement. That's why Ross Perot ran. Remember what Ross Perot ran on, may he rest in peace? That sucking noise when they're stealing all of our jobs to Mexico. We need tighter immigration. China is stealing our intellectual property. We need the middle class. I guarantee you, if I did a show of hands, who here voted for Ross Perot? Anyone?
I wasn't old enough.
Yes. And by the way, you did not elect Bill Clinton. That's a lie. Ross, no, it's true. You look at the data. It's not true. Ross Perot actually took more from Democrats than from Republicans. It is one of the most repeated, told untruths of American politics. That's why Ross Perot ran. I love the story of Ross Perot because George H.W. Bush reversed everything that Ronald Reagan did almost instantaneously. H.W. Bush raised taxes, he filled the civil service with career diplomats, he started more foreign wars. And what was the speech that H.W. Bush gave when the Berlin Wall fell? He didn't give a speech because he said to his advisors, I don't want to rub it in. So I want you to think about something. We're up against one of the most institutional evils in the history of the planet. The wall falls, and our U.S. president does not wave the sword and say, here I am giving the eulogy of international communism, because he didn't want to ruffle any feathers and rub it in. We call it globalist, not someone that actually wants what's best for our country. Throughout the 90s, we saw what Clinton's agenda was. W. Bush was not what we think of him as. We got John Roberts from him, the Iraq War. We did nothing against China, didn't move the embassy to Jerusalem, never spoke at the March for Life. But then all of a sudden, in the most unconventional way imaginable, a guy comes down an escalator and starts to say things that no one else has said before. And he says, both parties have been treating you poorly. We're getting ripped off on trade. Our immigration policies make no sense. China is completely and totally ripping us off, and boy, was he right.
Right.
And then, in a very bizarre way, the 3 times married, twice divorced playboy from New York is more pro-life than the evangelical Christian from Texas. And then he started to do something that really bothered the American political elite, is he started to name names and say, why is it that we have NAFTA still? Why is it that we're in TPP? Why is it the embassy hasn't been moved? He beats the Bush dynasty, he beats the 16 other Republican candidates, many of whom are great people, and some of whom serve in his cabinet now. He then beats the Clinton dynasty, big tech, big media, surprise victory in 2016, and then he does something you're really not supposed to do. He violated the golden rule of American politics. He actually then did what he said he was going to do once he went to Washington. When a Supreme Court opening came up, he actually put Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and 300 other federal judges. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He spoke at the March for Life. He slashed Planned Parenthood funding, all those sorts of things. Why did he do all that? He did it for you, and that's why he has these rallies. Because when he goes to these rallies, they're for you, but they're also for him. He's looking at the people and saying, are you okay with what I'm doing? Because if not, maybe I should reconsider. He's having a conversation with the American people. And the activist media, they don't get any of this stuff. He's actually wondering, am I properly representing normal people in the kingdom? Because that's what it's become, a kingdom of Washington, D.C. When all these other politicians, they dream of wealth, power, fame. Guess what? He had all of that before he ran for president. He didn't need more of it. That's what makes him different. He was one of the wealthiest people on the planet, one of the most popular people on the planet, one of the most sought-after speakers. He was in rap songs. He was in sports games. He owned sports teams. He had all the trappings of someone from the ruling class. What makes him so dangerous is he defected from the ruling class. He couldn't handle going to another cocktail party with Bill and Hillary Clinton or the Bushes, where they're like, huh, those normal people, they don't even know what, we're just gonna go send another factory over to Wuhan. We're gonna go send another manufacturing facility over to Beijing. Trump said, you know what? I only got a couple, maybe a couple decades left on the clock at most. He's like, I love my country. I'm not gonna put up with this anymore. And albeit clumsy at times, loud, direct, but honest. Amen. He ran for president and one of the most successful presidents in American history. So what does he represent? What he represents is a question of who's in charge. And the American founders are so incredibly brilliant. We should be so thankful for everything they've done for our country. But they gave us elections for a reason. They gave us elections as pressure release valves. They gave us elections so that we didn't tear each other apart in the streets and that we wouldn't go into actual physical brutal combat with each other. And now we actually have one of those opportunities on Tuesday, where we're going to ask ourselves the question, who's in charge? Is Peter Strzok in charge? Is Google in charge? Is Larry Page in charge? Is Lois Lerner in charge? Is Eric Holder in charge? Or are you guys in charge? That's the question of this Tuesday's election, is who's actually still in charge of this great gift that we've been given? And I already articulated what exactly is going to happen if Joe Biden wins. And so it's this simple. The polling has to be wrong for us to win. It's that simple. Polling's not great. So it wasn't good in 2018. We still overcame that in some races. Still wasn't good in 2016. And we overcame that. We know how that worked. Some ways the polls are tightening. One poll has Trump down 17 points in Michigan. I'll tell you, if Trump loses by 17 in Michigan, I'm done. Okay, then there's no way. So we don't. What we do know is this, though, is that there's still time left on the clock. Not for me, but for you guys. So, which is, will normal people, regular people, that have lived in this greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world, will they reject an American suicide, which is what Biden's talking about? Talks about a dark winter, shutting things down, higher taxes. It is the most depressing presidential candidacy in the history of American politics. It feels like he's giving a eulogy at a funeral every time he talks. Donald Trump's dancing, YMCA, Macho Man, it's like all over this, right? So I'll leave you guys with this, and then we're going to sign some books, which is that I've dedicated everything I possibly could to this election. If we lose, I'll have no regrets. I left it all on the field, all on the line, because I know the stakes. And I'll tell you this, one of the reasons I worked as hard as I did on this election is I know exactly what's coming next, everybody. Come with me to Stanford, seriously. I want you to hear what the next group of CEOs believe. That America needs to be destroyed. It's just a matter of when, not if, and we're all in this together to destroy the capitalist system. Stanford Business School, they tell me this stuff, face to face. So I know the stakes. The only way to deal with that whole community is by us winning and them losing. Benjamin Franklin was asked after the Constitutional Convention, what kind of country do we have? Is it democracy? Is it theocracy? Is it something in between? He says, well, we have a constitutional republic if you can keep it. A lot of Bears fans here? Yeah? Bears fans, Packer fans? Can I tell you one thing that bothers me? We treat politics like football games. When you guys watch the Bears, you guys probably have your favorite seat you watch the Bears in. You don't want certain friends over because it's bad luck. You eat your favorite type of chili. You guys all have that kind of karmic stuff you guys do. You know it. No matter what you guys do, it has no bearing on the outcome of the football game, unless you're the offensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears. No matter what you do, It's not going to impact whether or not the Bears are going to win the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship. It makes no difference. Politics is different, and we treat politics like a football game. Where I go to gatherings like this every day, everybody, and people say, "What do I do?" And I'm like, "You don't know what to do still? Really? Where you don't know that we can go knock on 1,000 doors a day like our kids are doing? You can go make phone calls, peer-to-peer text message. You can do all sorts of, you can go find young conservatives that are in vast need of your help, because this is actually a spectator sport. Not a spectator sport, it's an activist sport. Football is a spectator sport. Just look, you hope for the best. And so we're about, what are we about? Let me think about this. 72 hours out, about 78 hours out from the future of our republic being decided. Wow, no pressure, right? My charge to you is do something in these next 78 hours to materially make a difference for President Trump. He wins this state, he wins it all. Make phone calls, text your friends, knock on doors, get engaged, take ownership for this election. It is not a spectator sport. That's what I'm doing. Thanks so much, everybody. God bless you.